Resident Evil 2 is one of the most well-liked games in the series, at least from what I understand, and after playing through the remake, I can 100% understand why. And even if my experience with the original version on the PlayStation 1 isn't all that high, from the times I have played it, it still was really fun. And of course, with that enjoyment led me to wondering about the development for the game that was with the PS1 entry, with what got changed, removed, and everything else in between. And keep in mind, when I'll be talking about the game, I'm only going to be talking about the final release, and not that first draft with Elsa walking and whatnot. So unless there's some stuff in the disc from that version, I will cover it as well. Also, my information I will be getting is from the cutting room flow, and I will link that in the description below if you guys want to check it out. And let's start off with some unused items, which were actually in the first draft of the game. First, there was this green handgun, and it doesn't seem like there was any function with it in the game. It's been guessed that this was just used as a placeholder for any unfinished inventory graphics, and the gun was actually based on one called the SIGPRO S228, since the name just so happens to be in the Japanese version of the demo. It's also used as a placeholder image in the third game of the series as well, and it has a similar weapon in that game, but in this case it's actually usable and it's called the SIGPRO SP2009. Another unused item is a flamethrower fuel canister, and it's unknown why it's unattainable. Something else that's actually really similar is the spark shot ammo, where it went unused and you can't get any. But you can technically get it, I just lied, but it's only through hacking, so at least there's that. There's also some other unused chemicals for Claire, that being the FR-W09 and the AC-W24. The latter was meant to be acid rounds and the former was meant to be flame rounds. If you were to put them in via cheats, they would actually work perfectly fine, and you can combine them with normal grenade rounds with the chemicals up to 6 times. This mechanic does exist in the demo versions of Resident Evil 2, but it's a very early state of it. And something else that's cool about it is that in the demos you can combine the chemicals together to get a recovery one, and this item does of course not exist in the final release. But this mechanic did return in Resident Evil 3, so at least Capcom did visit the idea eventually. And fun fact about the FR-W09 is that it went unused there as well, so I guess this chemical really just can't catch a break. Now moving on to guns, and there was actually one called the Calico M950, and it's unusable in the original and some of the re-releases, but you can get it if you use cheat codes. There is footage of the gun in action, which is on the cutting room flow page. Again, that's linked down below if you want to see it. It's usable by Leon if you give him the code SAA, and it's been guessed that this might have been an extra weapon for him because Claire gets a code when she gets equipped with a stolen costume. And you might as well have guessed that it's very unfinished since it uses the same animation as Leon's handgun. Along with that, it makes the same shooting sound as a Colt, and it does 0 damage to enemies. There's a mod for the PC part of the game that does add all the missing features, which is nice. It also uses 9mm handgun ammunition at either 50 or 100 round capacities. This game was also in the demo of it as well, and in a prototype version it was usable but unfinished. It had no sounds attached to it and had limited ammunition, so maybe it could have just been a bonus weapon. The ID for the demo versions match up with the SSA as well, and the final version, as I mentioned, it just was replaced with the Calico M950. But there isn't any evidence of the SSA ever being the prototypes for Resident Evil 2. Now we move on to a machine gun that went unused, and that was the HNK MC51. They're all images that do exist in the final release, and if you hack them in, it manages to crash the game. The weapon also does end up taking 2 inventory slots, and you can mod it into the PC release and use it. But this weapon is seen in the 1.5 version of the game, and kinda does exist in the final release, but it only really was seen in a cutscene. The weapon was most certainly replaced by a different machine gun, that being the MIC-11, and that might be the reason you can actually get from a dead body from an Umbrella security service member, since the MC51 was used in a cutscene by them that I just mentioned. There's also quite a bit of unused backgrounds, which I'll go over, and of course I'll show them on screen. The first one is of Kendo's gun shop, where there's an angle that shows a glass window that isn't broken. Of course that one went unused, and the broken one was the one that did go used. Another unused background was in the waiting room in the police station of a zoomed in image of a flag, and this might have been used to see if the player decided to check it out, and I can't say why it went unused since it does look pretty nice. There was also another zoom in image, but this time on a door at the fourth floor corridor, and it's at the back of it. This does lead into the evidence room as well. The zoom is also a leftover of an early state of development, but not known exactly where, and also in the trial version of the game has this design. But in the final version, it's just a normal swinging door, where the other one is a sliding door, at least it looks like one. The next one is an unused camera angle for the evidence room, where the angle ended up being used is facing the other way. The next one I'm going to show is pretty obvious on why it went unused, and it's for the archives room. It's a very early version of it with just basic outline for shelves. We have another zoom in unused background, and this one was of the photo lab. And I guess it had a similar purpose as the one in the waiting room if you checked it out. At least that's my guess. We also have an early version of a corridor with a puzzle that had movable statues. There was some massive differences here, like a door being added on the left and the statue and sign were moved further down. The windows on the right also kind of differ, like their size and whatnot. Something else that was found in the Japanese try version, the missing door used to be further down. And another unused background is in the hallway in the RPD, where in the bottom left corner, the grate is still on the vent. But in the used version, it's on the floor, and there's a bit more debris here as well. There's also an early version of the east office of the police station on the first floor, and for some reason the unused one uses a really wide shot and it's tilted downwards. It's been mentioned that this could have been used for a cutscene, or maybe to help highlight an item you can pick up. And the final version, the door that leads outside to the staircase, is gone in the early version of the room. Another unused room is the basement generator floor, or room I guess, but doesn't matter as much, but it's a close-up of a small table there. There's also the same shot in the demo, but an early version of it. There's also an early version of the room where the Magnum can be found. Obviously there are the differences of the camera angle and the fact that there's a dead body and you can actually see the Magnum, and the beds are a little bit more detailed here as well. We also have a few rooms in the sewers that went unused as well, and they're very similar close-ups for cutscenes with Ada and Leon. There are quite a few of them, so I'll just stop talking for a bit and show them all on screen, so if you want, just pause. And there are definitely a whole lot of cool backgrounds that went unused. I think it's pretty obvious why some of them did. There are far more backgrounds that went unused, but in the end, they're really similar to the other ones that went unused, where it's just either unfinished or just a very early state. And even with the guns and other unused content, it was really cool to see as well. I really want to hear what you guys found the coolest unused piece of content that was in the final version of Resident Evil 2. Let me know in the comments below. Again, if you want to see more information, you can check out the comment flow page in the description below. And thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow my Twitter, which is also in the description below. I might do more videos on Resident Evil 2 and the other entries, since there is kind of some cool information here and there, so keep an eye out for those. I also might do a video talking about the differences between the Resident Evil 2 versions and even the remake as well, so again, keep an eye out for that. And honestly, just again, thanks for watching, and see you guys in a future video.